So I want you to imagine something for a second. Think about a time when you felt like you were just, talking in circles.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there.
Right. Like you have all this passion, you have this incredibly important point you want to make, but you just feel weighed down by your own sentences.
It's a very specific kind of frustration.
Yeah.
Like you're wading through mud.
Exactly. Wading through mud. And, what if I told you that having a massive, highly advanced vocabulary isn't about weaving these endless, complicated tapestries of words, but it's actually the key to speaking significantly less.
Which is, I mean, it's totally counterintuitive
Mm.
because we have this built-in cultural assumption, right? We assume simple words make communication simpler and difficult words make things, well, difficult.
Yeah, that's the default setting.
Exactly. We think, if we want to be clearly understood, we should just rely on the most basic building blocks of our language. But the actual linguistic mechanics of human interaction paint a very different picture.
Right. And that's exactly what we're unpacking in today's deep dive. We're looking at this really fascinating excerpt from a text called Van Bandukdan.
Yes. Such a great piece.
It really is. On the surface, it's just this deceptively simple case study about an English learner named Ryan and his language coach.
Right. Just a standard teacher-student dynamic at first glance.
Exactly. But our mission today goes way beyond a traditional grammar lesson. We are going to use Ryan's story to explore this massive linguistic paradox. Basically, how upgrading to advanced, highly specific vocabulary.
Scary words.
Right, the scary words. How using those actually reduces the cognitive load on your listener. It makes your communication simpler, richer, and just far more accessible.
And that underlying philosophy, it really touches on how our working memory processes syntax in real time. Because whether you're a non-native speaker trying to cross that threshold into fluency or, honestly, a native speaker just trying to command a boardroom without rambling.
Oh, I've definitely rambled in a boardroom.
We all have.
Yeah.
But the core friction is identical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we constantly sabotage our own meaning by overwhelming the listener with an unnecessary volume of basic words.
Instead of just doing the heavy lifting to find the precise term.
Exactly.
So if you've ever felt that mental drag where you're exerting so much verbal energy but failing to actually move your point forward, this deep dive is going to fundamentally change how you construct your next sentence.
It really reframes everything.
It does. So let's jump into the source text and how it sets up this dilemma. It introduces our main subject, Ryan, and it immediately establishes this really sharp contrast in his experience.
Right, the enthusiasm versus the reality.
Yes, because on one hand, the text explicitly says that he, quote, loved speaking English, like the internal drive, the passion, it's all there.
He wants to connect.
He wants to connect. But then the counterweight hits right after. It says, every sentence felt too long.
Oh, man. That phrase, every sentence felt too long, it just perfectly encapsulates the psychological burden of that intermediate language plateau. And that is a totally natural survival mechanism in real-time communication.
Yeah.
You're just trying to bridge the gap between your intent and your inventory.
Right.
In linguistics, we view words like very as intensifiers. When that precise descriptive word eludes you, your brain just leans on these intensifiers to kind of multiply the weight of a basic concept.
Like trying to make it heavier than it actually is.
Exactly. But the text is highlighting the architectural flaw in this strategy because scaffolding is supposed to be temporary.
Right.
When you build every single sentence out of scaffolding, the structure itself becomes incredibly heavy. It's unstable.
I used to think of this reliance on intensifiers like over-salting a dish in the kitchen.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Like, if you only have salt in your pantry, you just keep adding more and more of it to try and simulate a complex flavor profile.
But it just ends up tasting like salt.
Exactly. It doesn't become a different flavor. It just becomes aggressively salty. But the more I look at the actual mechanics of what Ryan is doing in the text, a better analogy might actually be like file compression on a computer.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Because when Ryan says it is very easy to understand, he's basically trying to send a massive uncompressed folder of high-resolution images over a really slow internet connection.
Yes.
He's sending one word at a time, he's clogging up the conversational bandwidth, and he's forcing the listener to just sit there while the loading bar, slowly creeps across the screen.
The bandwidth concept is the perfect lens for this, because in cognitive science, That bandwidth is our working memory.
Our mental RAM.
Precisely. The human brain can only hold a limited number of variables in its active processing center at any given moment. So when you use 5 words to convey a single state of being, you are actively eating up your listener's mental RAM.
Wow.
You're forcing them to hold the pronoun, the verb, the intensifier, the adjective, and the infinitive, all in suspense until the sentence finally concludes.
That sounds exhausting for the listener.
It is. Ryan's sentences feel too long, not just because of the raw syllable count, but because of the sheer cognitive stamina required to assemble them, and for the listener, to decode them.
Which brings us right to the intervention from his language coach. And this is where the text really pivots. Because when Ryan brings this frustration to her, the coach does something interesting. The text specifically notes that she smiles.
Yes, that smile says a lot.
It really does. And then she delivers this piece of advice that just completely reorients his entire approach. She says, quote, "You don't need so many words."
It's so deceptively simple.
Right. But okay, I want to challenge this premise for a second on behalf of everyone listening. Because if I'm trying to sound intelligent, right, or if I'm trying to make sure my listener grasps a highly nuanced concept, my immediate instinct is to provide more context.
Right. Explain it thoroughly.
Yeah. My instinct is that a robust vocabulary naturally results in longer, more elaborate explanations. So isn't there a huge risk that using fewer words just makes you sound, I don't know, reductive, like you're dumbing it down?
Well, the risk only exists if you are removing words without increasing the density of the remaining words.
Ah, volume versus density.
Exactly. And the coach's smile in the text, that's her recognizing this exact fallacy. We culturally equate volume with intelligence, but she's introducing this fundamental shift from volume to density.
So she isn't telling him to stop explaining himself.
No, not at all. She's telling him to stop diluting his meaning across multiple low-value words.
So it's about like upgrading the quality of the lexical item itself so it can just carry more weight on its own.
Yes, a truly advanced communicator doesn't use more words to describe an object. They use the single, highly dense word that contains all the necessary contextual data baked right into it.
They use the compressed file.
Exactly. They use the compressed file. And the text demonstrates this beautifully by having the coach write down specific alternatives. She's moving Ryan from these basic, A1 or A2 level modifiers to what the text explicitly identifies as C1 vocabulary.
Okay, let's contextualize that term really quickly for the listener before we look at the specific words. When the source text refers to C1, it's referencing the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages,
Yeah.
the CEFR scale.
Right, the global standard.
Yes, it's the standard for measuring language proficiency, and it moves from A1, which is like absolute beginner, all the way up to C2, which is native level mastery.
Yeah.
So when we talk about a C1 word today, we are talking about a very advanced tier of language.
And what categorizes a word as C1 is usually its specificity and its cultural or emotional connotation.
Because basic A-level vocabulary deals with broad concepts, right?
Right. Hot, cold, good, bad, happy, sad. Primary colors.
But C-level vocabulary deals with the highly specific gradations between those primary concepts.
The mixing of the colors? Exactly. A C1 word is not just a synonym. It is a specialized tool engineered for a specific semantic job.
Man, I love that. A specialized tool. Let's actually see the engineering in action with the first tier of precision the coach gives them. So she takes Ryan's clunky, uncompressed phrase, very easy to understand, and she replaces it with the C1 word, straightforward.
The mechanical shift there is just staggering.
It really is, because we go from 5 separate grammatical units down to one single compound word.
And consider the temporal processing required for the listener. Very easy to understand, Anders,
Yeah.
It requires the listener to continuously update their understanding of the sentence as each new word arrives. But straightforward delivers the concept in its entirety the absolute millisecond it is spoken.
Boom. Done.
Boom. Furthermore, straightforward carries an inherent sense of momentum and authority that very easy to understand just totally lacks.
It really fundamentally changes the dynamic between the speaker and the listener. Like, think about it. If I'm standing in a boardroom and I say, our new strategy is very easy to understand, I don't know, it almost sounds defensive.
It does, but you're apologizing.
Right. It sounds like I'm trying to reassure this skeptical audience that, please don't worry, you won't have to work too hard to get this. But if I stand up and say, our new strategy is straightforward,
Totally different vibe.
it's commanding. The word itself physically embodies the concept. It literally moves straight forward. It doesn't apologize.
And that points directly to the sociolinguistic power of C1 vocabulary.
Say more about that.
Well, the words you choose don't just convey data, right? They signal your social positioning. They signal your confidence. By eliminating that trailing, meandering phrase, Ryan immediately projects a much higher degree of linguistic certainty.
He sounds like he owns the room. Okay, so the coach applies this exact same principle to emotional states next. She takes his phrase, very funny, and replaces it with hilarious. And this highlights something I find just endlessly fascinating about how we categorize human experiences.
Oh, the dilution of the word funny.
Yes, the word funny is incredibly diluted. It's just this baseline observation, like a cartoon in a Sunday newspaper is funny.
A clever remark from a coworker is funny.
Right. And adding very to it just implies a slightly higher degree of that exact same baseline observation.
It remains a cognitive evaluation. You are observing something out in the world and categorizing it as humorous.
But hilarious crosses a boundary, doesn't it?
It crosses a massive categorical boundary. It stops being a mere observation, and it becomes an involuntary physical reaction.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. When you use the word hilarious, you are implying a loss of control, a disruption of your breathing, a visceral bodily response. The modifier very simply does not possess the semantic power to bridge the gap between a cognitive evaluation and a physical state of being.
That is so true. It's like trying to get to the moon by climbing a really, really tall ladder.
Laughs.
Like you can just keep adding rungs to the ladder. Right? It was very, very, very funny. But you're never going to actually achieve orbit. You need a completely different vehicle.
And hilarious is the rocket ship.
It is. It operates in a completely different atmosphere of meaning.
And because it operates in that different atmosphere, it serves as a massive cognitive shortcut for the listener.
How so?
Well, the listener doesn't have to calculate exactly how funny you found the movie based on, the pitch of your voice or counting the number of intensifiers you used. Yeah. The word hilarious paints the entire emotional landscape instantly.
They just get it.
Right.
Now, the third example the coach gives perfectly reinforces this idea of crossing a categorical boundary. She tells Ryan that instead of saying he was very surprised, he should say he was astonished.
Again, moving from the cognitive to the visceral.
Right. Because surprise is, well, how would you define surprise linguistically?
Surprise is fundamentally an issue of probability.
Okay.
You calculate that an event is unlikely to happen. And when it does happen, you experience surprise. It's basically a mathematical calculation in the brain.
That makes sense.
But astonished, if we trace its etymological roots, it comes from the idea of being struck by thunder or being turned to stone.
Wait, really? Struck by thunder?
Yes. It implies a literal paralysis of the senses.
Oh, wow. A complete violation of your expectations to the point where your brain temporarily just stops functioning.
Exactly. And you cannot achieve that level of sensory paralysis just by stacking the word very on top of a basic probability calculation.
I was very, very mathematically incorrect about that.
Exactly. It doesn't work. And this reveals exactly why Ryan was feeling so bogged down by his own sentences.
Because his internal experience was so much bigger than his words.
Yes. He was constantly experiencing these high-level visceral states. He was experiencing astonishment and hilarity, but he was forcing himself to communicate them using low-level mathematical terminology.
His internal experience was in 4K resolution, but he was transmitting it in standard definition.
That's a brilliant way to put it. The friction between his complex reality and his basic vocabulary was creating that suffocating feeling.
But okay, I want to pause here because I want to look at this from the listener's perspective for a minute. There's a potential trap here that I think a lot of people fall into.
Okay, what's the trap?
If I suddenly start injecting words like astonished or straightforward into my everyday casual conversation, don't I run the risk of alienating people?
Ah, the fear of sounding pretentious.
Yeah. Isn't there a certain, I don't know, egalitarian beauty to using simple universal words like surprised? Like if I'm trying to reduce the cognitive load, doesn't reaching for a dictionary level C1 word actually force the listener to work harder to understand me?
That is absolutely the most common hesitation people have when upgrading their vocabulary.
I mean, nobody wants to sound like they swallowed a thesaurus.
Right. They fear sounding academic or stiff. But the text provides 2 bonus upgrades from the coach that directly address this fear. Because advanced vocabulary, when it's used correctly in social contexts, it isn't about sounding like a textbook.
What is it about them?
It's about tapping into universally understood cultural shorthand.
Okay, let's look at those bonus upgrades because they do deal with very different types of communication. So the coach tells Ryan to replace very careful with meticulous and to replace very hungry with starving.
Let's analyze meticulous first, because the distinction here is entirely about intent and character.
Okay.
If you tell someone you were very careful while reviewing a document, it implies risk aversion. It implies that you were, walking on eggshells, trying not to make a mistake.
It's fundamentally defensive.
Very defensive, right?
Like, careful is what you are when you're carrying a full cup of hot coffee across white carpet.
Exactly. It's driven by the fear of a negative outcome.
But meticulous reframes that completely.
It completely reframes the action. Because meticulous is not driven by fear. It is driven by a dedication to craftsmanship.
Oh, I like that.
A master watchmaker is meticulous. A forensic accountant is meticulous. By swapping that phrase, you aren't just shortening the sentence. You are changing how the listener perceives your underlying competence.
And your professional character.
Yes. You are signaling active mastery rather than passive caution.
That distinction is so crucial, but it actually raises a deeper philosophical question for me about, translation and meaning.
Oh, so?
Well, if meticulous carries all this extra baggage about craftsmanship and mastery, and very careful is just about avoiding mistakes, then the coach isn't just fixing his grammar, is she?
No, she's not.
She's changing his underlying message. By giving him this C1 word, isn't she altering what he is actually trying to say?
She is altering the output, yes, but she is rescuing the original intent.
Rescuing the intent.
Think about it. The text validates this distinction later when it notes that Ryan's English became, quote, richer. When Ryan previously used the phrase very careful, it is highly probable that he actually wanted to convey the craftsmanship of meticulous.
But he just didn't have the word for it.
He simply lacked the lexical tool. He was forced to paint a complex portrait using only primary colors. So the coach isn't putting thoughts in his head. She is giving him the specific brush he needs to paint the thought that was already there.
Man, that completely reorients how we should think about vocabulary expansion.
It's powerful.
It really is. It isn't about memorizing obscure words just to sound smart at dinner parties. It is about finding the exact frequency to transmit your internal state.
That's beautifully put. And speaking of internal states, the final example, swapping very hungry for starving, this shows how advanced speakers use hyperbole to just bypass literal interpretation entirely.
Oh, this is a brilliant example of sociolinguistic mechanics, because biologically, very hungry is an accurate, literal description of an empty stomach. But human communication is rarely purely literal, right? We use language to signal mood and urgency and social needs.
Exactly. When someone says they are starving, they don't mean they are experiencing clinical malnutrition.
I need an IV drip right now.
Right. They are using an extreme hyperbolic C1 usage as a shortcut. It instantly communicates, my energy is dropping rapidly, my mood is deteriorating, and acquiring food is now my top priority.
It packs all of that social context into one single word.
And because it is a universally recognized cultural shorthand, the listener doesn't have to decode the literal meaning of starvation. They immediately grasp the social urgency.
They know it's time to pick a restaurant.
Yes. And this hyperbolic compression is a hallmark of native-level fluency. It shows a mastery of the unwritten rules of the language, where literal definitions are routinely sacrificed for emotional resonance.
Okay, so Ryan has this new arsenal. He has these zipped files, straightforward, hilarious, astonished, meticulous, starving.
His compressed files.
Right. And he takes them out of the classroom and he deploys them in real-world conversations. And the text reveals the climax of this experiment, outlining a specific triad of success.
The 3 big results.
Yes. The results are his sentences became shorter, his English sounded richer, and here's the centerpiece of the entire text. People understood him even more easily.
And that third outcome is the ultimate vindication of the coach's philosophy.
Yeah.
It represents the central paradox we set out to explore today.
It is a massive paradox, because logically, a simpler word should be easier for a listener to process.
Right.
An A1 word like easy is learned in the first week of language class. A C1 word like straightforward takes years to master.
It takes a lot of exposure.
So why on earth does the source text claim that using higher difficulty structurally complex words resulted in the listener understanding him more easily.
To resolve this paradox, we have to look closely at the neuroscience of auditory processing. We have to look at how the human brain parses syntax in real time. Let's do it. We touched on working memory earlier, but let's break down exactly what happens in the listener's brain when Ryan speaks. The brain is fundamentally a prediction machine.
Okay.
As it hears the beginning of a sentence, it is constantly, rapidly trying to guess the end of the sentence to save processing power.
Oh, that makes sense. So when Ryan starts a sentence with, "The instructions were very," the listener's brain is instantly spinning up dozens of possible conclusions.
Yes. The word very acts as a multiplier, but it doesn't provide any semantic direction.
Right, it's just a magnitude.
Exactly. The instructions could be very confusing, very long, very helpful, very poorly written.
The brain has no idea yet.
And so the listener's brain has to hold that multiplier in a temporary buffer. It's burning cognitive energy while it waits for the noun or adjective that will finally give the sentence meaning.
Wow.
If Ryan then says easy, the brain updates its prediction. But he isn't done. He then adds to, forcing another update, and finally, understand.
So the listener is doing all the manual labor of assembling the concept piece by piece. It's like I'm handing you the raw materials for a house. Like, here's some lumber, here's some nails, here's some drywall, and I'm asking you to build the structure in your mind while I'm still talking.
That is exactly what is happening. And that assembly takes processing time.
Even if it's fast.
Right, it may only be fractions of a second.
Yeah.
But in the context of a fluid conversation, those micro delays accumulate.
They add up.
They create cognitive fatigue. The listener has to dedicate a significant portion of their attention just to deciphering your structural scaffolding.
Leaving way less attention available to actually engage with your underlying ideas.
Exactly.
But when Ryan swaps that out and he just says the instructions were straightforward, what happens to that prediction machine?
The machine doesn't have to work at all.
It just rests.
The meaning is delivered entirely pre-assembled. The word straightforward contains the concept, the intensity, and the direction, all in one highly dense package.
So the listener's cognitive buffer remains completely clear.
Yes. They don't have to hold anything in suspense. They can instantly process the information and focus their mental energy on formulating a response rather than decoding your prompt.
This just completely flips the entire concept of vocabulary difficulty on its head.
It really does.
A word might be difficult to learn on a vocabulary test, but it is vastly easier to process in a live conversational environment.
Exactly. The difficulty of acquiring a C1 word is a burden borne solely by the speaker during the learning phase.
Right.
But once acquired, that word actively relieves the burden on the listener during the communication phase. True fluency, therefore, is an act of extreme empathy towards your listener.
Oh, I want to highlight that idea. True fluency is an act of empathy.
It is.
When you do the hard work of finding the dense, precise word beforehand, you are doing the cognitive synthesis on behalf of the person you're talking to.
You're doing the heavy lifting.
Yes. You are respecting their time and their mental energy. You aren't just, showing off how many flashcards you memorized. You are actively streamlining their experience of interacting with you.
And this brings us back to that fundamental distinction between volume and density.
Right.
When you rely on volume, when you use the A1 modifiers to artificially construct complex thoughts, you are transferring the cognitive workload onto the listener.
Here, you figure this out.
Exactly. But when you rely on density, you take ownership of that workload. You compress the file before you send it.
Man, that is such a powerful framework. Let's look at how the source text synthesizes this entire journey. It provides a really definitive conclusion for Ryan's case study, summarizing the philosophy in 3 incredibly tight sentences.
I love this ending.
It's so good. It says, he learned that advanced English isn't about speaking more, it's about saying more with fewer words. One precise C1 word can replace an entire phrase.
It serves as a direct repudiation of the idea that mastering a language means talking incessantly.
Right, like fluency doesn't just mean motor mouthing your way through a conversation.
Exactly. The ultimate goal of language acquisition is not to maximize your output, it is to maximize your efficiency. The text proves that precision allows for subtraction.
Precision allows for subtraction.
When you trust the inherent density of a highly specific word, you liberate yourself from the exhaustion of over-explanation.
You stop carrying the scaffolding around with you everywhere you go.
Yes,
And the secondary effect of this, as the text notes, is that you inherently sound more fluent because confidence in communication is deeply tied to brevity.
it is.
When you can deliver a high-resolution thought without hesitating, without leaning on filler words or modifiers, you project an aura of total linguistic control.
It alters the conversational pacing entirely. Without the drag of multi-word modifiers, your sentences regain their natural rhythm.
They bounce back.
Right, the heavy, over-assaulted sentences become light and agile. This is the physiological relief Ryan finally experiences at the end of the text. He no longer feels like his sentences are too long because he is finally using tools designed for the exact job he's trying to perform.
This has been such a fascinating deconstruction of the mechanics of meaning. I mean, truly. But I want to pivot here at the end and direct this entirely at you, the listener.
This is where it gets real.
Yeah, it is. Because the text we dissected today uses Ryan, a non-native English learner, as its primary subject. It frames this entirely as a hurdle in secondary language acquisition. But if we take this philosophy of cognitive load and file compression and apply it broadly, a deeply uncomfortable truth emerges.
A very uncomfortable truth. And that truth is that millions of native speakers are trapped in this exact same A1 modifier loop without even realizing it.
We absolutely are. We assume that because we grew up speaking a language, because we possess the innate grammatical instincts, we just automatically operate at peak efficiency.
We assume we are fluent in our own thoughts.
Exactly. But the reality of daily communication is that we get lazy. We default to the path of least resistance.
We reach for the intensifiers just as quickly as a beginner does.
You really do.
We say a project is really hard. Instead of calling it arduous, we say an employee is very smart instead of calling them brilliant or astute.
Or we say we're very tired instead of exhausted.
Exactly. We clutter our native environments with the exact same conversational drag that Ryan experienced.
We're sending massive uncompressed files all day long. So as you walk away from this deep dive today, I want to issue a challenge.
I love a good challenge.
I want you to actively audit your own speech patterns today, regardless of whether you're speaking your mother tongue or practicing a new language.
Just pay attention to it.
Right. Listen to yourself in your next meeting or, during your next phone call with a friend. Pay attention to the physical sensation of your sentences. Notice when they start to feel heavy.
Notice when you're using 3 or 4 generic words to circle around a feeling you could pinpoint with one.
Yes. Catch yourself in the moment you reach for those empty filler words, the veries, the reallys, the extremely's.
And recognize that impulse not as a lack of intelligence, but just as a temporary lapse in lexical precision.
Exactly. And when you feel that conversational drag, when you realize you're sending uncompressed files and overliving your listener's buffer, I want you to pause.
Just take a breath.
Take 1 second to stop talking and ask yourself, what is the precise high-density word waiting just beneath the surface? What is the one specific tool that can replace this entire clunky structure?
Because it's usually right there.
It is, because the moment you find that word, you don't just shorten your sentence. You sharpen your meaning, you respect your listener's cognitive load, and you unlock the profound power of saying infinitely more by speaking significantly less.